know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
To quote Draymond Green, the Golden State Warriors, y'all gonna get this podcast today, TJ.
I love the NBA, man. Like,
I love the NBA too.
And look at it, full hands up. Like, I didn't even watch the game 3 of the NBA Finals. It's not like I'm not a hardcore fan, but I find this stuff so amusing. And seeing the reporter go post game with Draymond, basically asking, is he worried that he's giving away state secrets, X's and O's to the Boston Celtics by doing his pod, and then seeing Draymond's sort of response on the pod itself. Let's face it, you can't manufacture that stuff. Like, it's just, there's so many personalities, and some of it, again, from afar, just seems absurd in the best way possible. I love the kind of circus around the NBA Finals.
I love it. I love the fact that podcasting is seen as a distraction for an NBA player in the NBA Finals. This is the peak of the medium here. It's not going to get any better than this when it comes to podcasting.
Well, and this is just overthinking it to the nth degree. Like, what do all of us want to do? We want to build an audience. We want to try to educate the fans, entertain the fans, give people something to do with their life. Life is busy and hard for a lot of people. Let's face it, the hour they give us or they give the Draymond Green show or whatever is usually the escape or the time away from the important stuff. And so, like, to me, again, I haven't listened to his show, but I assume he's giving you access to an athlete in the middle of the biggest games of his life that no one else, you can't get anywhere else. The Stanley Cup Final is going to start next week. There's going to be no NHL player between games telling you what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he's seeing in the games. I mean, that's, if there was, I'd be listening to every episode. So I actually give him props. I know we're not at stick taps portion of the episode, but I'll give Draymond a little stick tap here off the top, because I think it's cool what he's doing, and all the power to him. There'll be lots of noise around him, but I think he should keep doing it, because at the end of the day, we're in the entertainment business, and he's pretty damn entertaining.
Now I'm just thinking, who in the NHL would do this? Who's the closest person we could think of who would, Brad Marchand might do this.
For sure. I mean, he tweets. You've seen some of his tweets have been pretty hilarious, but toeing the line sort of, or get, close to being offside, whether it was about escrow. Remember, he was going at Carolina over stuff. I mean, he's certainly got opinions and isn't afraid to drop them. I think there's a lot of guys that would do it. I think a guy like Nazem Kadri would do it. I know I talk about Naz a lot, but he's kind of just puts himself out there. I don't think he's too worried about what you or I or anybody else thinks about him. But it's still just not part of the culture of the sport. I think that some of the teams might have an issue, frankly, if a player wanted to do that. Whereas obviously in the NBA, that isn't Draymond's issue is the media and the fans. Some of the fans on Twitter, it's not his team.
Do you think, how much flack would Brad Marchand get if he decided to do a Draymond Green-esque show, while he's sitting out recovering from surgery, because he's not going to start next season, and as the Boston Bruins go through a particularly interesting year, because on paper right now they are not expected to look any good. They probably won't have Patrice Bergeron. They're not going to have Marchand. Who knows what the future is going to be for David Pastrnak, and whether that could lead to him still signing an extension with the team. Bruce Cassidy's not going to be there. We know earlier this week he got let go. There's a lot of questions around the Boston Bruins. I didn't mean for Brad Marchand to mention him and then turn that into a transition to the actual topic I wanted to get to, but I'm going to take advantage of this anyway.
Sure. Well, let's start with Marchand. I think the regular season, if a player wanted to do this, I don't think there'd be any issue, and that's whether you're healthy or injured. So that would be fair game. I just think the playoffs, everything gets a little different. Like, I heard John Cooper say in the first round that the Lightning have an unofficial ban on social media during the playoff time for their players. Now, I've seen a few of their guys post like the winning photos on Instagram on their stories. Victor Hedman, Palat, some of the guys I follow are doing that. So I have to assume it's not like a hard ban. But I think his point was just don't get too caught up in what anyone's saying about you. Don't engage in that space. And so I just think because of the way teams view and treat the playoffs, A lot of teams over the years have spent, the night before games at home in the hotel to avoid distraction, quote unquote. So, I do think that it would be frowned upon by an NHL team. As for the Bruins, there's a lot to process there. Let's start with Bruce Cassidy. I think I'd be hard pressed to think of a situation where a coach had more success and was fired. 6 out of 6 years he coached a team, they made the playoffs, multiple 100-point seasons. 2019, they were 1 game away from winning the Stanley Cup. Even this year, 1 game, Game 7 in Carolina, away from getting to round 2. They've objectively, by any measure, whether you just go by standings points, things like expected goals against, expected goals for, they've been an elite team every year he coached them. And, so that's a big decision. And, I suspect Bruce Cassidy will only be unemployed as long as he wants to be. I mean, he's got 1 year left on his deal. He could sit home and collect $3 million and not work this coming season. But if he wants to get back to work, there's going to be a job for him somewhere, and likely with a good team, with a team that views him as a difference maker, someone that they could bring in and maybe get them to another level. What it says to me about the Bruins is a couple things. He was known to be hard on certain young players. We know the Jake DeBrusk situation played out semi-publicly in terms of him wanting a trade and not seeing eye to eye with the coach. I think this says that they're going to be leaning a lot more on those younger players. And when I look at their group, beyond a Charlie McAvoy, who's obviously a stud, already in sort of the Norris Trophy conversations. I know he hasn't got a nomination yet, but he's right there in my mind. Jeremy Swayman's a young goaltender. Beyond those guys, I don't know if any of the young players in the organization are going to be difference makers, if they're going to be players that form the core of the next group, beyond Bergeron and Marchand and even Pastrnak. And so it looks to me like they're taking a step back. I don't think this is going to be a full rebuild. I believe the Bruins will make a real concerted effort to sign David Pastrnak this summer, a year out from potential unrestricted free agency for him to a long-term deal to keep him a Bruin. That they've got McAvoy signed long-term. As I mentioned, I think Swayman's a good piece there. I see this as more being a little bit of a reset. But it's going to be tough to see them making the playoffs next year. I mean, we don't have all the information right now, so it's not a firm prediction. But just looking at the way everything's going, right, really seems like Patrice Bergeron is seriously considering retirement. So you might be walking a 5-time Selke winner out the door, including a guy who just won it this last season, produced something like 0.9 points per game. Like still has all the tools needed, but you don't have Marchand potentially for half a season. Matt Grzelcyk's out to start the year. McAvoy's out after offseason surgeries. It's just a lot to make up for. And, it's going to be a tough year in Boston next year, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I was seeing two of my colleagues, Craig Custance and Sean Gentili on the Athletic Hockey Show, discuss the idea that the Bruins could easily just use next year as like a 1-year tank, like a sneak tank. Like you're not going into like a full-on rebuild or you're losing how many years of being competitive just so you can kind of maximize your competitive window for however long. But considering the draft that's supposed to be up for next year with Connor Bedard and Matvei Michkov and some of the other front-loaded, some of the other talent that's available there, that makes the 2021 draft look as more tantalizing. The 2022, 23, wow, I'm getting my years mixed up. The 2023 draft as more tantalizing than this year's 2022 draft. That is technically, that should be the year for teams to kind of, tank so they can get themselves some top quality talent. It could be a fortunate thing for the Boston Bruins in this situation.
Well, if that's how it breaks, you love to see it. And remember, between the 2011 Cup and sort of the more recent rise of this team, I think they missed the playoffs twice. I need to fact check that because that's truly off the top of my head, and I haven't looked at it recently, but I think they missed it twice, and they drafted Pastrnak and McAvoy in that time, if I'm not mistaken, and DeBrusk. They did a little reload on the fly and then came back, and lo and behold, those were pretty good players to add to the core that still included at the time Chara and Krejci and Rask and Bergeron and Marchand. So, there's some precedent there for it. I don't know if you can line it all up perfectly, but it would make a little more sense, the Cassidy thing too, because, given how successful he's been, you might be a little concerned if you're, that the team's too good even under him, even with the guys missing, and B, that he's not going to be happy in that situation, that's not going to be something he wants any part of. And, obviously some of your players that have been around wouldn't want part of that. But, at least you've insulated some of them with the surgeries they've had. They're not going to have to endure all the losing for the whole season long. And if Bergeron doesn't return, he's not back for it. So, I think there's some possibility to that. I don't know how coordinated it is. Like, I don't think that they like ordered all these guys into surgery necessarily for that reason. It's maybe just them sort of reacting to the unfolding circumstances. The fact that they are going to be missing that many key players to start the year, that Bergeron, all year long, I've actually seemed to me that Bergeron was leaning towards retirement. Just the way he treated those questions. It always just sort of felt like he thought this was his last crack at it. And, we'll see if that's actually the case. I think it's one thing to think about retirement. It's another thing to actually come out and say the words and truly be retired. I think it's a difficult thing for an athlete to do, especially one that clearly can still play, which is the situation Patrice is in. But yeah, look at it. It could be the smartest thing they ever did. I don't see them going from a 100-point team though to like a 60-point team, even with these losses. I just think they'll still be too good. But adding any player of quality in the top 10, say in the draft, would be a benefit to them. And as long as they get Pastrnak signed at a reasonable number, I don't see them bottoming out ever. And I actually think that's the smart thing to do. Sometimes the teams that bottom out, it takes so long to get out of the bottom. I mean, there's some obvious ones: Buffalo, Edmonton, Toronto, maybe to a lesser degree. They kind of bounced back quickly after their last place season. But I mean, a lot of things fell in place for them too. So the tear it down to the studs model, like Arizona is going through that now. Like reasonably, how long will it be till the Coyotes are competitive? I mean, I think they're hoping for 2 to 3 years, but it might be 5 to 10 years. Like who knows?
The Buffalo Sabres are in the midst of, coming back up in their second iteration of their rebuild. Like they started like a decade ago, and they still haven't gotten to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's culture too, I think. It sounds crazy to say, but, what the Bruins have to me is they've passed on this sort of winning tradition about the way they do things. And I have a lot of respect for it, honestly. I mean, they in a cap league, other than, say, Pittsburgh, which has made the playoffs every year since missing Sidney Crosby's rookie season, and then it's 15 or 16 years straight. I think 16 now. They've made the playoffs, and a lot of that is due to having Crosby and Malkin and how good those guys have been. And, they found a way every year to be competitive. The Bruins are a similar ilk, and they never did do a full rebuild, but they got as close as you can get to winning another cup, in the second iteration of this core that started with the Chara group. And, maybe there'll be a third. That would be quite something if they can pull that together. I think that's what they're trying to do, honestly. And, there'll also be players in free agency though. Like if Bergeron doesn't come back, still an if, I guess the biggest question is, will he have let them know that by July 13th? Because on July 13th, there's a few centermen out there like spitballing here, but how would Nazem Kadri look in black and gold?
Oh, it'd be so annoying.
Imagine him and Brad Marchand on the same line.
That'd be insane.
So, there are other center options out there. I'm not saying he replaces Patrice Bergeron. I mean, I think we all recognize Bergeron's in a class of his own as a two-way centerman, but I do think it helps you bridge the gap. And, they probably have the cap space to do it, if Bergeron isn't coming back, and we'll see what happens some other places. Obviously, they're still talking to David Krejci. So maybe you make some improvements up the middle that way. You still have Charlie Coyle there. If you were able to run out Kadri, Krejci, Coyle, I still think that's a competitive team.
That's insane. I'm groaning because of how annoying that line would be. Because Nazem Kadri, yes, people, are behind him with everything that happened with him in the St. Louis series, good score, having an amazing postseason. Well, it remains to be seen if he'll come back. But at his core, he is an annoying player to play against. And for him to go on a team which has annoying embedded in their DNA, it just fits.
I know, it seems like it fits. And look, that's truly pie in the sky at this point. We're a little early to say who's going where just yet. I don't think that's lined up by any means. But, Kadri's going to have options, and Boston would make sense to me if they lose Bergeron. So, I don't necessarily see them going right down to the bottom, getting the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. But, We'll probably know more 6 weeks from now when we're doing our last pods before summer vacay. I think we'll have a clearer view of the immediate future for this team because, they will have signed Pastrnak or not. If they don't sign him, they're going to have to trade him. And we'll probably have some clarity on the Bergeron situation, and we'll see what they did in free agency. And that will give us a huge bit more of this picture about what they're planning for next season.
A few things. One, Bruins fans listening at me saying annoying being embedded in the DNA, not at all an insult. And I'm pretty sure you don't think of that as an insult either. Like, that's a compliment to that's a testament to what the Boston Bruins are. I double checked the last time I believe the Bruins missed the playoffs, 2015-2016 season, the second of back-to-back seasons where they missed the playoffs. I was right.
My memory didn't fail me.
Oh, man, CJ, you're a pretty sharp guy. I think you should trust your memory a little bit more. You're pretty good at this sort of thing.
Well, we don't have like the segment like you see on those ESPN shows where at the end we correct everything I said wrong, because I think you could probably do that every show. So that's why I'm trying to be meticulous and careful, but we don't plan where these conversations are going. So it's not like you can look up every stat ahead of time. Some of it is off the cuff.
Exactly. Also, with David Pastrnak, and I know we've mentioned him a couple of times in this segment already. I don't know about. I get the sense you seem pretty confident that the Bruins are going to be able to re-sign him. And I keep thinking of that article from Fluto Shinzawa in The Athletic, where he in the lead. I'm not going to read it word for word, but he's describing the fact that the Bruins let Torrey Krug go the way that they did, David Krejci leaving the franchise, and David Pastrnak seemed to have been paying attention to those two particular situations. And a source close to Pastrnak told The Athletic, according to Shinzawa's article, 88 Pastrnak had seen how Don Sweeney, the Bruins GM, had treated his two best friends. No chance he comes back with Sweens as GM. I was just curious about what you think of that particular quote that's floating out there.
Well, look, Fluto is a conscientious, respected reporter, one of the best in the league. So I'm absolutely I'm not challenging his source, and I don't have his source. So no one's told me that explicitly. What I look at is I think David Pastrnak, someone who loves being a Boston Bruin. And yeah, he might not be happy with how things have unfolded, but I just don't see, I don't think that I don't connect the dot directly and say like, he's not coming back. First of all, if you've been following his social media during the World Championship specifically, there's some pretty strong hints being dropped there that maybe Krejci is coming back to the Bruins, which might, ease some of those concerns. And secondly, they're going to have a conversation this summer. Like I think they're going to sit down. Don Sweeney will lay out his plan for where this organization is going, what he sees, where he sees Pastrnak fitting. And then they're going to talk terms on what could be an 8-year contract extension and worth life-changing money. I'm sure David Pastrnak probably already has life-changing money, but even more bigger life-changing money. And he'll have a decision to make then. And it will be probably implied, if not stated outright, that if they don't find a way to sign that deal then, that he'll have to be traded and he'll have a decision to make. And so, everything in pro sports, there's a lot of different competing emotions and energies. Like it's not easy all the time. And uncomfortable conversations get forced by the nature of the way the CBAs work and just how winning is so imperative to everything. I don't see this guy as gone. I really don't. I actually think if I was setting odds, I think it's more than likely that he stays. But we don't know yet, and they don't know yet because they haven't got into negotiations. Those conversations still need to happen in July. But I see a world. I'd be surprised if they let him go. That being said, if Don Sweeney really wants to do a rebuild with a capital R, it's a pretty good piece to start it with. If you're trading David Pastrnak, you're probably getting back a good player and high picks. Frankly, I don't see it just as a futures trade. So maybe he ends up exploring that road if he really believes they have to try to finish near the bottom next season. But based on his press conference this week, Don Sweeney sort of mentioned shifting to the younger generation, to paraphrase him. But I didn't get the sense he was like, let's tear this thing down. I mean, again, they had a damn good year and weren't that far out beating Carolina. Like, I'm not saying they were going to win the Stanley Cup, but they were among the teams that could have won it if they got hot and had they had some injuries in the playoffs. I mean, certain things didn't go their way, but if they got through the Hurricanes, I mean, who knows? Maybe we're still watching them play today.
Yeah, and Bruce Cassidy still keeps his job. which is still mind-boggling. I don't know if just like I know you mentioned the Jake DeBrusk thing, but I wonder if other guys in that locker room were also just not big fans of his. But I also wonder, and I know we touched off in terms of, the fact he still has a year left on his deal. I'm very intrigued at which teams might actually want to take a chance at getting a Bruce Cassidy, because he seems like a pretty good consolation prize if you don't get Barry Trotz, who's also still available.
He might be better. I mean, it's hard for us on the outside to gauge that, but if you look at his results, like they have been elite, and he's got some good players there, but I think that you can point to some things he did even with those players. Like Brad Marchand became elite with Bruce Cassidy as his coach. Now, would that have happened anyway? Maybe. When we don't have we can't go back and we don't have like the looking glass here to imagine the alternate universe if there's a different coach there. But, he got even Bergeron to a different level, I think. And so, he might be even better than Trotz. Certainly is in the conversation. Trotz has just been around so long. This Bruce Cassidy waited a long time from way back when. You probably wouldn't even remember he was the coach of the Washington Capitals, and it didn't go so well, and had a long journey to get back to the NHL as a head coach with the Bruins. But, it was a pretty magical type of run he had there. And man, if they win one more game in 2019, what a legacy he would have. I still think it was a pretty darn good legacy though.
Small plug to the Jesse Blake Sports Report. In his latest episode, he tries to make the argument that the last 5 cup winners should all have asterisks next to them. He tried to make the point that the St. Louis Blues, because of, I think there was like a missed goal. I think there was like a blown goal call in like game 5 of that series that the Blues didn't deserve to win. I wonder how he would have felt if the Bruins won. Another more serious thing with Bruce Cassidy and how elite he's been. This is from JFresh Hockey from a couple of days ago. Bruins at 5-on-5 expected goals against ranking in Bruce Cassidy's tenure. 2017, 2018, the Bruins were second. The year after, second place. 2019, 2020, first place. Last season, 2020-21, third place. This past year, the Boston Bruins at 5-on-5 expected goals against ranking first. Like, that's one particular aspect to it. But in that particular aspect, in terms of expected goals against, like Bruce Cassidy, I think his team is pretty good.
That's personnel, but that's also systems. And, when you look back at those 2 years the Bruins missed the playoffs, all the guys that we love on their team were still on their team, or most of them. Like Bergeron was there. Marchand was there. They obviously grew as players in that time. They got some better guys around them. You can't ignore that McAvoy joined the blue line, has become, pretty beastly back there. But that's systems. That's coaching, I think. And look, every coach has a shelf life, though. Like it is the truth. I think coaches have to push individuals and a team so hard that you only have so long. Like you only coach as long as John Cooper's coached the Lightning if you win multiple cups. And you get some leeway. I got to tell you, Julian, I have never seen a team, I can't remember if I mentioned this on a previous episode, that has like treated the playoffs the way that the Lightning have. Like there have been some days they don't even go to the rink on morning skate. Like that's the level of trust between coach and team and players. Like, and you only get that if you've won multiple cups, because otherwise the results would be too like it would just become a sideshow story, right? It would look like you're being too laissez-faire. But I think that's how you have to evolve as a coach. Like he can't be pushing them all the time, right? And I think he's smart enough to know that, John Cooper. But you only get that point if you have that much trust in your main guys and you've won so much together. And anyway, it's a really tough profession because you got to push everyone really hard. And at the end of the day, I guess sometimes that gets a little tiring to hear. And so now it's going to be someone else's job to maybe come in with a bit more love. And again, that to me suggests a step back and a little less focus on winning every game.
So I wonder, I know we spent a lot of time on the Boston Bruins, and we will get to sports interaction real quick. I'm now curious about who takes over for Bruce Cassidy. I wonder if it's an internal thing or if they go out and they seek some coach. I have questions about that.
What I'd tell you is it's not, the decision isn't made. Like, it's not like they did this to get one specific hire. And I think they're going to cast a wide net. I saw Fluto Shinzawa mention Jay Leach as a possibility. I think that's a smart pickup by him. He coached their team in Providence and their AHL team. He spent last year in Seattle as a defensive coach on Dave Haxtell's staff with the Kraken. Young guy, I think maybe viewed as more of a modern thinker, might be more of a put his arms around someone rather than challenge them verbally type of coach. So he's a name to watch. But look, right now, how do we even gauge the coaching? Like technically, because Edmonton hasn't filled the job, although we have no reason to believe that Jay Woodcroft won't be back. There's like 9 head coach openings at this moment we're recording. Like I can never remember this happening. There's so many possibilities out there. A lot of established names. It sounds to me like John Tortorella likely to end up in Philadelphia. But there's you got Barry Trotz out there, you got Pete DeBoer out there for jobs. I mean, there's just a lot of coaches that have done a lot of winning in the league. Obviously, Bruce Cassidy to choose from, and then there are up and coming AHL type of coaches, or someone like Jay Leach who hasn't had that chance, as a head coach on an NHL bench yet. Played a little bit for the Bruins, had a brief playing career in the NHL, but keep an eye on someone like that because Fluto is pretty plugged in, as I mentioned, and it would make some sense, I think, that they go to someone younger, maybe a less obvious candidate to try to form the next great group of Bruins teams.
We have a lot we need to get to. Hold some of those thoughts. We'll get to them on the other side of our little hangout with David Bastel from Sports Interaction. As always, it's a 19+ thing. We ask that you play responsibly, and there will be a link to responsible gaming strategies in the description of this show. Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Speaking of games, tonight, Game 5 between the New York Rangers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. David, what are we looking at in terms of the odds for that game?
You know what, guys, quite surprising. I guess maybe yes, maybe no. But in my sense, the Rangers have been playing so well on home ice, but they're actually the underdogs here in game number 5. So some value on the New York Rangers. You can get them right now in an outright win at about 2.06. Tampa Bay comes in as the slight favorite. And I guess part of this, CJ, and I think maybe most of this, CJ, is, Tampa Bay winning the last 2 games, and it's all about momentum. But we saw what the Rangers do at MSG and what they've done this entire playoff. I don't know. Are you tempted at all to go Rangers on this one?
Well, I feel like the ghosts of the last 2 years haunt over this too. I mean, I think a lot of people have looked at those 2 games with Tampa climbing back in the series and thinking, okay, now the real Lightning are here again, the team that's won the cups, and they're just automatically going to roll to that cup. Easier said than done, I would say, and that is interesting because basically no one's been able to beat the Rangers at Madison Square Garden, I think, since Pittsburgh in the very first round. So that's still going to be a tough road game for the Lightning. They played well and did what they had to do at home, but I've learned enough or been around enough to know that what happens one game in a series doesn't mean the next game is going to play out the exact same way. That these things tend to be their own little snowflakes as we go along.
Absolutely.
That's some pretty good logic, because before you said that last line, I was leaning very closely to picking the Tampa Bay Lightning to win, just because it seems as if they found their legs, right? This is a team all postseason that, with the exception of the Florida series, they kind of start off a little slow, but then they eventually find that 5th gear and then they get themselves going. That's what it looks like. So I don't know. I feel like I might take Tampa in this one.
Should mention too, that total is at 5.5 once again, and 3 out of the 4 games have actually gone under that number. So under is the popular bet here. 5.5 is still pretty firm right now at Sports Interaction.
Okay. 2 best goalies in the league.
What about for
2 best goalies in the league?
Yeah, exactly. What about series results for the rest of this series?
Series results right now, everything seems to be leaning Tampa Bay, and that's no surprise just because we've seen it, what it looks like in game number 5. So 4-2 is the most common outcome as far as best odds or lowest odds or most, I guess, possible, because anything can happen here. You get it at about a 2.76. The next one in line is Tampa Bay to win this in 7 games. So are we looking at a split these next 2 to force that game 7 and have Tampa Bay win at MSG Ice? I don't know. Highest value, 5.15 for the Rangers to win the next 2 games. I don't know if I see this, but do you guys see 6 games or 7? Because I'm leaning on a 7 right now myself.
I'm cheering for 6, and then the Stanley Cup starts sooner.
This is true.
We get closer to summer vacation that way. Plus, I think it's just a long layoff for Colorado. I mean, if it goes 7, the Cup doesn't start until a week from Saturday. So I think there would be 12 days off for the Avalanche since the end of their series against Edmonton. That seems preposterously long, but if one series is a sweep and the other goes 7, there's only so much you can do scheduling wise.
David, CJ is rooting for summer to happen quick, so that way sunglasses CJ could appear much sooner than everyone. Well, of course, he just really wants to get into summer mode.
Yeah, no,
that's why he wants it that fast.
You know what? And I can't really blame him too much, because it's kind of like, bring on the finals. Let's see what this looks like. But I'll leave you with this one little tidbit. So we have Sports Interaction Futures, the 3 teams that are remaining and the odds behind it. So of course the Avs are heavy favorites right now because they're actually part of the Stanley Cup final. So a little bit of a betting tip. If you have a lean on the Lightning or the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup, so that means they have to win this series and actually advance, beat the Avalanche and hoist the cup. Now is the time, your last time for value on one of these teams, because as soon as one of these teams advance, those numbers will shrink and they'll be around the same sort of sense of where the Avs are right now. The Avs are a 1.57, the Lightning are a 3.35, and the Rangers are a massive 6.31. If the Rangers win, that cuts in half. If the Tampa Bay Lightning win, same thing could apply, maybe even more so. So if you like the Lightning to go for 3, here's the time to bet it. And if you don't, well, good luck with your Avs bet, because that's probably pretty good too.
Bad. Yeah, that Rangers one looks pretty good. I mean, 6.31. Okay. Yep. So I'll keep that in mind. I'm glad. I appreciate the lesson and the time you spend with us every time we do these episodes. David Bastel, thank you so much for kicking it with us. Be sure to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of the best odds. Before game, in game, best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com. David, we'll see you on Monday.
Sounds good, guys.
The Edmonton Oilers are where I want to go next, CJ. They had their post-mortem on Wednesday, and Ken Holland spoke to the media. And he talked about a lot of different things. Leon Draisaitl playing on a high ankle sprain for the majority of the postseason, which I think is really incredible. Like the fact that we were able to see him go off the way that he did in this postseason, even in that elimination game, that could have easily been the Leon Draisaitl game in Game 4 if it weren't for Arturi Lehkonen. But the future of Evander Kane, Jesse Puljujarvi is being talked about as well, Jay Woodcroft. What would you say is the biggest takeaway from that press conference with Ken Holland?
Oh, I mean, the goaltending question is probably the biggest in terms of their team, I think, moving into next season. And Ken was pretty open about the fact that he's not sure what they have back there, that he doesn't yet know what Mike Smith might have to give them. He's still under contract next season. Mikko Koskinen headed for free agency. They have Stuart Skinner, a young goaltender they like, but he's not proven yet at the NHL level. It's pretty clear to me they're going to be in the free agent market again. This will be the 3rd straight summer Edmonton's gone trying to upgrade there. They struck out the last 2 years for a variety of reasons. And, it's a pretty shallow pool of goalies, that are available at least as pure free agents July 13th. And so if they're not signing, say, someone like Jack Campbell maybe, or Billy Husso, the only other way to perhaps upgrade at that position is by a trade. And so, I think that's a big question heading into the Oilers offseason. As for takeaways, I don't know that Jesse Puljujarvi is back with his team next year. And, the way Ken Holland answered that question was pretty clear that he's still got to determine basically what fit or what role that player has with his team. And it's kind of ominously mentioning, I'm going to talk to his agent next week. And so I think they've got to a point maybe where Jesse Puljujarvi I think he's unfairly maligned in the marketplace there for whatever reason. Look, there's a long history, right? He was drafted in 2016. He played briefly, went back to Finland, came back. Like there's a lot of sort of water under the bridge. And I think sometimes those things compound in terms of how the player is viewed. But if you look objectively at his numbers, he's a high-end play driver. He's a great forechecker. His finishing ability is just not where you want to see it. I think he had 5 goals in the last 60 games, give or take, this season, an 8.8% shooting percentage. I think another team's going to look at a 24-year-old with those underlying numbers and see value, because he's not going to be viewed any longer as a 3rd overall pick, or, someone wouldn't be acquiring him to probably even play on their top line. I think it's more a middle 6 type of role for Jesse Puljujarvi. But a fresh start might be best for him. And so I think that was one of the big takeaways, is that it's pretty clear the Oilers front office is thinking that way as they enter this offseason. But, they've got a lot on their plate. They don't have a ton of cap space. They're going to make a hard pitch to re-sign Evander Kane. I think that was a great fit for both sides. I would expect they're bringing Jay Woodcraft back as a full-time head coach after, half a season as their interim. And, they're going to run it back, and they got to figure out the goaltending a little bit in terms of trying to be in a better position to win a few more games and lift the Stanley Cup next year.
I'm wondering, with the Oilers as they are right now, and it's obviously hard to tell, but I guess I just didn't expect them off this run to be able to get to the conference final. So now that they've shown that they're able to do it, everything should be this offseason about putting together a team that can go back to it. Like that's how next season at least should be framed in my eyes.
It's fair, but they're pretty handcuffed, honestly. I mean, they got a lot of salary commitments in there. Obviously, to sign Evander Kane, he's going to get a raise on what he was. He was a $2 million cap hit, plus a little bit over $2 million this season. He is not going to be a $2 million cap hit next season. Even losing Koskinen's contract, you're going to have to spend some money at the goaltending position, right? It's not just as easy as, that's a challenge. All these teams, like I look at the Maple Leafs, the Flyers, like there's a lot of teams that are going to, I think Washington will be looking for a goalie. All these teams, there's only so much money to go around, and the best players are going to command it. So, I think they're pretty locked in a lot of. I don't see anything grand that Edmonton can do. That being said, if McDavid and Draisaitl are as good as they are, as long as they can facilitate, get a couple wingers to play with those guys, you always got a chance. I just think that they really got to answer the goaltending question. I'm not hanging their series loss on Mike Smith, but he's going to be 41 next year. And he mentioned just physically how difficult this season was. He was injured for the first half of the year, most of it. I just don't know that you can count on him to give you anything reliable. And Stuart Skinner might be the answer, but you can't go into the year with him having to be the answer. And so to me, there's got to be another player brought into that mix that gives you some confidence, some stability. And so that is a big hole to fill. The Oilers are one of the teams chasing Andrei Kuzmenko, who's in the process of working through interviews right now, coming over from the KHL. They can offer him a chance to play with Draisaitl or McDavid, and that's pretty appealing. So I would think, just given that they have an opening to slot him in that basically no team in the league can match, I would think that they've got a reasonable shot of signing him out of the KHL. So maybe that helps them. I think their blue line will more or less be intact. So they're going to try to keep Brett Kulak. He was a good addition from Montreal. I think Montreal is going to try to bring Kulak back, and Edmonton's going to try to keep Kulak. And so that's ultimately probably where his decision lies in free agency. So I just don't see a dramatically different Oilers team, but the one area that they can feel a little bit more comfortable perhaps come training camp is if they can, get a goaltender that gives them a little bit of confidence. That maybe he's a 50 to 60 start kind of guy rather than just patching it together, which is what they did last season.
Yeah, the Mike Smith thing, such an interesting story to follow throughout through the end of this past year to now, where he was as hot as he was entering the playoffs. And he had those moments where he would just look spectacular. And then another moment where he's literally giving the puck up from behind the net, leading to a goal against. And you're absolutely right. He was not the reason why the Oilers lost that conference final series. Yes, he had some moments, but he was not the absolute reason. There are other people. I mean, Darnell Nurse playing hurt. He did not have a great conference final. That's one player who comes to mind in terms of guys I guess you can kind of blame for how that series went. But even then, for the Oilers, they got some scoring help. I mean, Connor and Leon, obviously, they did their thing. But Zach Hyman stepping up, Evander Kane stepping up until that boneheaded hit on Nazem Kadri, like they got contributions. They just ran up against the Colorado Avalanche team that was just more superior than them.
I don't think blame should be our approach here. Like, they got beat by the better team. And look,
exactly.
Colorado's 12-2 in these playoffs. So, they've laid a few beatdowns on Nashville and even St. Louis. I know it was a tighter series, but it's just a great team with depth at all positions performing at a high level. So, I don't know there's any shame in that. And I don't want to be too hard on Mike Smith either. Like, to play in the NHL at age 40 is a serious accomplishment. And he did give them some great goaltending in stretches of the season. He was .930 in that series with LA, and that was a tight series. Like Edmonton loses in round one, it's a totally different offseason. And he was a big reason why they managed to come back from 3-2 down in that series and win. And so, I know that, he didn't carry them to a Stanley Cup final, but, I think he battled through his injuries and he performed pretty well. I think organizationally, you can't go into a season expecting that from him again. He said it himself. Like he sounded like he had serious doubts about what he's got left in the tank. And I think that's credit to him. That's just honesty. But, they need to find a goalie. And I don't know who that guy is, honestly. Like, there's not a lot of sure things out there. I mean, even Billy Husso, who had such a great year in St. Louis, like it's a pretty small NHL track record. And he's going to have multiple teams bidding on him. But, maybe Darcy Kemper hits free agency. That's someone Edmonton looked at trading for last year when Arizona ended up making the deal to Colorado. I don't know if he'll stick around the Avalanche. Maybe he's an answer, but to me, that's the question that Ken Holland really has to figure out. And then you just got to try to get some version of Kane. You need a few guys to play with the top end players that can produce and hope that next year that they find a way through.
Last Oilers question for you. Where do you have Leon Draisaitl ranked among the league's best players?
It's a tough one. I mean, let's face it. We'll just start with McDavid at number one, I think is unanimous. Yes. And then in competition for the next few spots, you have some version of McKinnon, Matthews, Draisaitl, Makar, probably.
Yes.
That's probably most people's top five in some order. I mean, maybe you want to get cute and put a goalie like Vasilevsky in there. And I'm willing to hear that argument because I think he's good enough to warrant that. And potentially chasing his third cup this spring. So I don't put Draisaitl. It's so hard because in the moment, like in these playoffs, he's like number two, right? If we're just reacting to what we've just seen, like he's probably been more impactful even than McKinnon was. Matthews was out in round one. I know he played well in that first round series, but it's tempting to put him at number two. I don't know that he belongs there. If you're not a prisoner of the moment, if you step back and look at the last few seasons, I've still got Matthews in the number two spot myself. Goal scoring is the hardest thing to do in the league. He does it better than anyone. He does it at even strength. He does it by not hitting empty nets and stuff. Like I'm just saying, if you look at objectively the way he produces offense and he doesn't play with McDavid the way Draisaitl does for big stretches of time, depending on what the look is that day. So it's not a knock though, right? Like we always get in these conversations and it's like somehow it'd be disrespectful to say he's maybe the third or fourth best player in the league. We should do that. We should do a ranking show before next season, maybe.
Oh, really? You're down for that? I'm down.
We should. I don't know how many players would be reasonable. We should do like our top 25 or something, or top 50. I don't know how many we could actually squeeze in or how interesting it would look. But I think that would be a good thing to do, not in the moment when games are being played, like to step back and really look at it. But I've probably got him around 4 or 5. I might have Makar higher now. Like Cal Makar, like he's been great for a long time. And I know we've hyped him up on this podcast. He scored that goal in Chicago this year. Like we've given the man his due and his love. But I think doing it in the playoffs and doing it now, he's going to be in the Stanley Cup final. Like it's going to take his stardom to another level in terms of the way he's viewed. And, he's probably the favorite to win the Conn Smythe Trophy right now, I would have to think.
Oh, absolutely. So we can agree that Leon Draisaitl is a top 5 player in the National Hockey League. I view that, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes, but not number 2 or 3 for me.
Okay. I like your idea of a player ranking and doing it in the off season when we're not trying to make sense of them as games are going on. I love that idea. And I think we should kind of put that in our back pockets as off season content. That's something we should think about. Maybe not during the episode where we just talk about how our summers are going, but like maybe as like a preseason into next year or before next season type of deal.
Yeah,
how's that?
I see this as a September project.
Okay, we'll think about that for September. Do you have any other general thoughts on the Eastern Conference Final Series right now, with the Lightning battling back, and we're hours away from Game 5 now? Just something general. We don't need to spend too much longer on that.
I know we spoke about it a bit with David Bastel. Like, I actually am of the view, and I was sort of poking fun at this in that segment, but I'm of the view that we have seen the real Lightning come to life again. And if you look at the underlying numbers of this series, I mean, they're getting more and more of the expected goals in each successive game. Vasilevsky's been great in games 3 and 4. And I just think the challenge might be too great for the Rangers at this point in time. Now, you might be listening to this after Game 5, and this might be a horribly cold take by then if the Rangers come out and have a big win there and Tampa's on the ropes. But basically, until Tampa loses, I think they're going to win, if that makes sense. Like, I have to see someone actually knock them out before I believe they're going to go out, because I'm still blown away by what we saw in Game 3 on Sunday, the way they're down 2-0, and like just how strong the push was. Like that's just like a team. They clearly still want to play, man. Like you kind of find out what you are in your most dire moments sometimes, right? And we found out, to me, that's a dire moment. Down 2-0 in the series, down 2-0 in the game. Look, they've had so many long runs. Like, if they just went out in this round, and they might still, no one is going to say a bad word about the Lightning or what they're about. But, they still have sort of the fight of a champion to me. And man, it'd be a pretty heavy. It's going to be a heavyweight series either way. But a Lightning Avalanche Cup final would be something. And yeah, the way I see it going, quite honestly, is I just think that Lightning are going to be too much for the Rangers to overcome. But, that being said, New York potentially has 2 games on home ice still. Different factors can come in. I just need to see a different level, maybe of desperation from them. I don't know that they've raised their game quite enough for the moment. I don't know if that's inexperience or if they just can't quite get there in this moment in time. We've talked a lot about the Rangers the last few weeks. Like, this is not disrespecting their team by any stretch. We're down to, like, we're in the truth-telling moments, right? We're finding out really, like, the DNA, what these teams are about in this moment in time. And I think the Lightning's experience counts for a lot here. I think they know what it takes. And the fact that Vasilevsky's showing up and that they've started to really tilt the ice, I think it bodes well for Tampa to get through and to play for another cup.
You heard him say it. So now you got to watch Game 5 to see how that takes stands. I think you'll be
5-0 Rangers Game 5, and I look at the
It's okay. I think that series is going 7. I think with the way both teams have played in this series so far, I know the Lightning have been able to pick it up in the last few games, but I don't see the Rangers kind of folding for 4 games straight. I see them getting at least one more win in this before they force it to 7. Like, this has been a really good series so far. We've seen some of the best goaltending of the playoffs so far, and 2 of the best to do it right now, going at each other. Think about it. The Eastern Conference representative of this year's playoffs in the Stanley Cup final will automatically go in with the better goaltender over whoever Colorado trots out between Pavel Francouz and Darcy Kemper. That is a huge advantage for Tampa or the New York Rangers going up against the Colorado Avalanche. It's in a matchup that they will sorely need any advantage that they can get.
Well, and if it's Tampa, they're also going to be adding Braden Point, it would appear. Now, I don't know what percentage of Braden Point you're going to get if he gets back in the lineup, but everything seems to be trending towards him playing. And that's a big deal. The way he competes, even if he isn't at his best, I think he can make a small difference in small margins of the game for the Lightning. I mean, Kucherov's been an animal too these last couple of games. Like, some of the plays he makes are insane. The pass he made to Palat on the winning goal in Game 3, 40 seconds left, was just like, he didn't even look at him, and it's right on the stick. I don't know that the Rangers are good enough right now. That's all. Like, there's no shame in it. Like, they're, as we're recording this, they're 6 wins away from the cup. Like, they've played longer than 28 other teams this year, 29 actually counting Edmonton. So, they're right there. But I just, in the final analysis, I don't know that they can push the Lightning out.
Now, our next partner is a pretty cool product. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. I'm sure you'll all agree that most of us are not huge fans of having to take a bunch of pills or vitamins in the morning, but with Athletic Greens, you can get rid of all those extra vitamin bottles and finally make some room in your cabinet. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good. You'll really enjoy actually getting your daily vitamins in through them. What is this stuff actually? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. All of the things. Like that's pretty cool. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, daily free, or gluten free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. It will cost you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. So you don't have to go out to the store, go to Starbucks all the time. Invest in some Athletic Greens. It has over 7,000 5-star reviews, recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Before we get to stick taps, I just want to plug your latest for North Star bets. I believe you can also read this article in the Toronto Star as well. 7-star pending NHL UFAs with uncertain futures. I can imagine I'd like to know if you have any gut feelings on those 7 players you mentioned in the article, just to mention just a few before we go into them all. Guys like Evgeny Malkin in there, Patrice Bergeron in there. I think Johnny Gaudreau's in that list, but of course that's a guy whose future, a lot of questions surrounding him. There are some interesting pieces who we are not completely sure about their futures and their destinies beyond this offseason.
Well, here is the game. There's 7 players that have spent their entire NHL career with one team and been at that team for 10 years in the organization, and they're pending UFAs. Let's go through them one by one quickly because I can do it.
Let's do it
off the top of my head. Patrice Bergeron. First of all, he's not going to test the open market. He's a Bruin, or he's heading into retirement. My gut says he's retiring. And so I don't think we see him back as a player anywhere, but certainly not with Boston. Then you have Evgeny Malkin. This is a tough one. This is a tough one for me. My gut says he's moving on, but I don't say that with a lot of conviction. He just means so much to the Penguins. Like you sort of feel like, okay, obviously they've got to this point where there's 5 weeks to go till free agency, and he still had a point a game last year. I know he was injured, was recovering from knee surgery for the first half of the season, but my gut says that he's moving on. We'll see how that plays out. Chris Letang, moving on. I think that there's the issue with that negotiation is really comes down to term. He's 35. Had a great year last year. He played the 3rd or 4th most minutes on a per game basis of any player in the league. Produced offensively as he has. Right shot defenseman. I could see him getting a 4 or 5 year contract on the open market, even though that takes him to 39 or 40. I think that'll be out there for him. I don't get the sense that Pittsburgh wants to go there with him. Who's next? Andre Palat, I think.
Andre Palat is next.
I think Andre Palat's leaving too. Just not a lot of analysis here. That the Lightning love him. He's been a huge part of sort of their secondary wave that's driven him to so much success. He's having a massive playoffs. I just don't think they can afford him. That they have within the next year, they have to give raises to Anthony Cirelli, Eric Chernak, and Mikhail Sergachev. Those players are all younger than Palat. And, I think reasonably this would not be, if it goes the way I think it's going to go, it's not like they don't want to keep him. I just don't know that the money can make sense for him and them to have him stick around. Philip Forsberg in Nashville, I think he's staying. I'd be really surprised if he left. The guy loves it there. They love him. They have sort of their own internal cap. They call it Nashville dollars. To me, he's going to make more than the $8 million that they're paying Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, but a little less than the $9.059 that Roman Josi gets, their captain. And so to me, the range is there. The fit is there. He loves it. They love it. I'd be surprised if they don't find a way to get that done, even though negotiations have been a slog. Like they talked during the season. They've been talking since the year ended, and they haven't been able to get there just yet. But I think it ultimately gets done. And then Johnny Gaudreau. It's a tough one to read. I think he's genuinely conflicted. Coming off his best season in Calgary, individually, as a team, they had a great year. Scores the overtime winner in game 7 of round 1. But he had 115 points. Like, talk about a once in a lifetime opportunity to take that to the market. I think he tests the market, but I'm not sure if he ends up leaving or not. So I know the Flames would like a answer sooner rather than later. They got decisions to make on Matthew Tkachuk, Andrew Mangiapane, Oliver Shillington. They have other guys to sign and potentially to some big contracts. But I think that Gaudreau will at least take a peek at the market, and then I'm not sure how that's going to play out once he does. I'm not sure what he'll find there and if he'll see enough to want to leave.
Last guy, John Klingberg.
John Klingberg, I think he's going. He's open to staying, though. Like, even though there was, a public trade request during the season, I think that was some frustration that built up because negotiations were slow. They didn't produce anything. He's been a plus value player. Like, credit the Stars. Go way back when. He played like 65 career games, and they signed him to a 7-year deal. We haven't seen many like that before since. So pretty risky, and just because he hasn't proven it, but they got great value. He signed for $4.5 million. You can understand why he took that contract. He didn't know what his career would be at that point, and he got 28, 30 million, whatever, of secured money to do it. But as a result, he's been underpaid throughout his career. I think ultimately he's going to have to go to the open market to make up some of those lost earnings, if you want to call it, or to get paid more of his market value.
You can go to North Star Bets online to find CJ's latest, or if you've seen in the Toronto Star already, you can check that out there. 7-star pending NHL UFAs with uncertain futures. CJ, well done on that segment. And before we go, are you still good with your Draymond Green stick tap, or did you have someone else in mind?
Yeah, I'm sticking tapping Draymond Green, man. Like, I got a lot of respect for his pod game, and I want to show him support. I want to be one media member showing him support, because it seems like everyone's going to the NBA Finals is on his back. Come on, guys, find another storyline. Yeah. Find another storyline. This is as contrived as it comes.
I'm hoping Adam Wilde finds a way to poach him from whatever network that he's on right now. I would love Draymond Green as a teammate on the SDPN.
That would be awesome. Imagine he came and did an appearance on the CJ show.
I would love that. That'd be cool. We just let him talk X's and O's. Don't provide too many secrets, of course.
Right. We could get us a take on the Sharks or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whatever he would like, or he's a Michigan guy, so maybe the Red Wings.
Damn right.
All right. So mine is actually going to go to Leon Draisaitl, because I think the performance that he put on in the playoffs while battling through injury, one of the more remarkable playoff performances I've seen in recent memory. I think it was game 4 with the way that game is going. Like, one shot I remember vividly from game 4, one goal going in, and Draisaitl on the bench trying to celebrate, and then he just immediately hunches over in pain. This is a guy who battled through a high ankle sprain in the playoffs and still put on an incredible all-world performance pretty much throughout every round he played in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. He deserves a stick tap. And Leon Draisaitl putting everyone on notice. Look, that's all right. We get it. Connor McDavid's the best in the world, but 2 through 5, you have to really think about who's in that spot. And you can make an argument that Leon Draisaitl is number 2, number 3, number 4, and he's no lower than 5 as of right now.
And be sure to argue down here in the comments, because we'd love to see what you got to say.
Absolutely. All the engagements here. Subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have questions for CJ, tweet them at him at reporter Chris with the hashtag AskCJ. We will get to them on the Monday edition of the CJ Show. But in the meantime, it's time for us to enjoy the weekend. CJ, always a pleasure doing these shows with you, brother. Enjoy the weekend. Get some rest up. And we'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode. For Siege, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
3 coffee show for me today. I'm drinking for you and Nick.
3 coffees? Oh, geez, man. I'm surprised you're not jumping up and down.
I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, this podcast is over unless you want to do another second one. See you Monday.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JKMcKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.